Hello and welcome to Sideline Story, your destination for sports news, analysis and discussions. I'm Yang Guang. This week we focus on the latest locker room drama at Liverpool and Real Madrid. Will Mohamed Salah leave Anfield? How much time should be given to Xabi Alonso? To unpack the questions, I'm joined here with my fantastic co-hosts Tian Yu and Brandon Yates. Alright, let's begin with one of the biggest European soap operas recently in football. The tension between Mohamed Salah and Liverpool after he claimed his relationship with head coach Arne Slot had broken down. Things have eased a little bit recently, with Salah returning to the squad and playing, and his current commitment to the Egyptian national team at the Africa Cup of Nations. But to me, the conflict has undoubtedly left some scars on their professional dynamic. So Tian Yu, Salah's contract will run through 2027. Considering the current situation, do you think his time with Liverpool will be over before that?
Well, honestly, I think most Liverpool fans still hold a very special place for Mo Salah deep inside their hearts. I mean, what he's done for the club over the years really matters. Even despite of the recent comments he made towards the media and tensions he had with the managers. And I'm sure Salah himself also still feels that bond, the personal bonds with the club and also with the fans. I mean, you don't just forget all those wonderful moments and the nights, the wonderful nights they spent together. But I think if he really wants to stay and keep fighting for the red shirt, I mean, he has to come to terms with the fact that maybe he will be starting on the bench sometimes and just even missing out some games altogether. Because the truth is that he just can't give the team like what he used to every single week anymore. And I think judging from what we have seen from Salah himself, all the comments he made and what kind of a person he shows, I think that's the problem. His pride and his confidence just probably won't allow him to accept that kind of role. And deep inside, I think he still wants regular minutes and still to be the main man in the team and just to feel fully respected across the whole squad. And if those things aren't there, I don't see him staying. So even if the club and the fans would love to give him a respectful, proper farewell, and there's already talks about offers to him from Saudi Arabia. And honestly, I think it wouldn't surprise me at all if we end up seeing him playing for Saudi the next season. I think he should think twice about leaving. Because, I mean, even at the age of 33, with a clear drop in form compared to his peak times, I think he can still help the team. When he's on the ball, defenders still focus on him. That alone just gives his other teammates enough space and opportunities.
Right. Based on the latest reports, Liverpool's ownership has stated they have zero intention in selling Salah in the January transfer window. That's a firm stance. But to me, it seems like there's no going back for Salah and Liverpool in their relationship. I mean, he might not leave this winter. It could be the next summer transfer window like you predicted. Unless, I mean, Salah commits to the club publicly and, he quickly finds his form back, both of which I don't see will happen. My take on this is that, yes, Salah has declined quite obviously, but you can't blame just one player for the entire team's underperformance. But it's totally wrong for the player to, make that tension public. It's kind of childish and embarrassing both for him and the club. Everything should be done under the table. If, Salah pushes for a move, again, that discussion should be conducted behind the scene. Otherwise, it could put him and the club into a very awkward position. But Brandon, I mean, the key question here, I assume, should be, will Liverpool be better off without Salah right now?
I don't think they'd be better off without him. I think they are crying out for the best version of him. But I think at this point in his career and at his age, it's not really possible, particularly in his position. And I think Tian Yu and I can definitely comment on this quite accurately, having watched this particular individual who I'm sure you know I'm going to mention
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
Cristiano Ronaldo. He went through similar things, where I think there wasn't a drop in form, but there was definitely a need for him to shift his position and
yeah.
possibly a need for his club, Real Madrid at least, probably in the last season or two of the time that he was there, where it was quite noticeable that a move on was needed for both the club and for the player himself. And even though I don't think it was handled correctly, I think the move to Juventus benefited all parties involved. I think it was the right move for Ronaldo. It might have been a little bit too soon for Real Madrid, even though they did go on to win the Champions League without him. Again, I think it did benefit Ronaldo, Real Madrid, and it certainly benefited Juventus as well. I mean, the goal output that Ronaldo provided, I mean, wherever he goes, was absolutely massive. But I think what was done correctly there in terms of that move, I think that there were ongoing conversations between Ronaldo and Real Madrid, and it wasn't kind of like a breakdown of relations. Yeah, there probably were some breakdowns in relations behind the scenes. Yang Guang, like you mentioned, I'm sure there were some very difficult conversations that happened with, let's say, Ronaldo and Florentino Perez, and also Messi and Laporte. I think there were also some difficult conversations there, although I think that was different. That was more financial. When it came to moving Messi on to PSG. So there's been a lot of moves in the past where aging stars have been moved on and for differing reasons, but I think a lot of it had to do with positional changes and a lack of form and that sort of thing. And just to focus on Salah and the Liverpool situation in particular, I think it's just a whole bunch of factors happening at the same time that are really detrimental to the manager, the club, and the player himself. For Salah himself, I don't think that he has adjusted well to aging. I think that he also believes that he can perform at the same level in the same position and produce the same output. And I don't think that's possible. I think that Salah and his team should have been aware that first, Liverpool are struggling. Second, there's a breakdown with the manager. But away from all of that, in terms of what he could have done as an individual, I think he really, if he wants to continue playing at the highest level in Europe, which, by the way, I'm not entirely sure that is what he wants, but if that is what he wants, then he needs to, I think, shift his position and play a more central role in a team that doesn't require him to press, like we've seen
Yeah.
with Ronaldo, at Juventus, and of course in Saudi. At United, for example, we know that Erik ten Hag and other managers that were around when Ronaldo came back in, they wanted him to press. He didn't, even though he continued to score a huge amount of goals. The positional change and the change in his playing style in his career didn't suit the club for what they needed at the time and what the manager needed at the time. And I think Salah's in a similar position where to get the best out of him might not necessarily suit Arne Slot and the Liverpool team. But away from all of that, it really does seem like Arne Slot is struggling to get the best out of all of the players, not just Salah. And Liverpool are struggling to find consistent identity after the Jurgen Klopp exit. So it's just I think it's a difficult time for all involved. I think it's going to be a difficult transitional time for Liverpool and Slot, and they need to figure out what they're going to do with Slot and if they're going to keep him, despite all of the money that he spent. And all of the money that he spent, particularly on players like Isak, Wirtz, etc., they have not found form yet. Although I do think that Liverpool fans need to be patient because, look, we could talk about this for hours. There's a multitude of reasons why certain players aren't performing well for Liverpool at this time. But I think in a season or two, we will see the best out of the likes of Isak and Wirtz and even Arne Slot and his tactics. But by then, Salah might be 35. So, and will certainly not fall into those plans unless, like Tian, you mentioned, he's willing to drastically change his role within the squad, which with someone like his experience, his achievements, and potentially his ego, it might not suit him very well. So if he wants to continue playing at this highest level and winning titles, first of all, I don't think leaving in January would benefit him or Liverpool, because I think if he left Liverpool and somehow Liverpool could have a run in the Champions League, for example, and get to a final without him, which is possible, I think that would be very hurtful for Salah and the Liverpool fans. And I think that Liverpool could definitely use Salah in a Champions League semi-final or final, even if he's on the bench or not playing at the highest level. So I don't think leaving in January would be best for him. But if he does decide to leave, if he wants to continue being the star man and playing on the wing and, doing what he's been doing for the last 10 years, then I think Saudi is the best move for him because I think he still can play in that role in that league. But if he wants to be a star man in Liverpool, he definitely needs to shift his attitude, potentially his position, and be realistic about the amount of hours, minutes that he can play and the output of goals that he can get.
Right. Accusations have been around Salah about, he placing his individual, pride or ego over the team, or he lacked to play with teammates, especially new signings, Florian Wirtz and Alexander Isak. But again, I think Liverpool's slip this season can't entirely be Salah's fault.
Yeah.
This has made me wonder the traditional model of veteran players, playing out their contracts or getting a farewell within the club at the end of the season is being challenged. I mean, with more clubs now focused on, long-term squad planning, we are seemingly entering an era where the respectful exits for our high-earning icons is harder and harder. So, Tianyu, what do you think is the strategic way for a club and a legendary but declining star to part ways now?
Well, yeah, when it comes to a perfect goodbye, I always think about Toni Kroos. I just couldn't think of a better exit for a football player than his. Winning a Champions League final and receiving all the a full stadium applause,
and make every Real fan still miss him right now.
Yes, exactly. Then just stepping away on your own terms, it is just simply beyond words. And I think a lot of fans, me included, just think it was too early for him to quit at his age, because he was only 34 then, and he was still playing at a very high level. But just from the player's point of view, I think it was almost perfect. I mean, he left with respect, with trophies, and something that, like you said, very important, because people just are going to miss him now. Because whenever Real Madrid suffers or struggles, fans may still say, imagine if Toni Kroos was there. But that said, cases like Toni Kroos's is very rare. And not many players have that level of control or the courage to just walk away from the high wages, the big roles, and everything they had. Kroos was one of the few situations where the player clearly had a say, because at that time the club and the fans all wanted him to stay, but it was him that chose to go. And in most cases, in reality, I think the power is with the club. I mean, once a player reaches the latter stage of their career, the club decides their wage, the contract, the salary, or their role. And that's when legends are told to accept fewer minutes and lower wages. And we've seen it over and over again, like Brandon just mentioned, like Messi leaving Barcelona, Cristiano Ronaldo leaving Real Madrid, and now potentially Salah leaving Liverpool. So we like to say football is about loyalty and emotion, and sometimes it is. But the reality is, at the end of the day, it's still about money, about contracts, and about the market.
Right. You mentioned Toni Kroos. It reminds me of the similar case in Philipp Lahm.
Yeah.
He also retired earlier than people expected. We expected him to make more contributions, but suddenly he hung up his boots. But in these cases, I think the players made the sacrifice instead of the clubs. They made things, look decent. But at the end of the day, they sacrificed their wages. They sacrificed their possibility of winning more trophies at the latter stages of their careers.
Yeah.
So, Brandon, in these high-profile departures, who do you think has typically more power, the club or the player?
I think the club always has the most power, unless it's a very sort of mythical figure at a club, you know. So I
And
think
is it
Messi at
fair?
Barca, I wouldn't say it's fair, but I think most of life isn't fair, right? You know, I think the people that hold the power and hold the money make the decisions at the end of the day. And I think that applies to all areas of life, whether you're a junior at a company or whether you are a superstar footballer at the biggest club in the planet. I think at the end of the day, you know, the decision makers and the power holders and the salary providers eventually will be the ones that make the final calls. And I think that applies to 99.999% of situations. And maybe one or two of the situations that we've mentioned, maybe there are some unique situations where that's not the case. It also depends on the state of the player, I think. So, you know, if you're a player at the highest level and at your peak at a club that truly relies on you for their success, then maybe the player holds not necessarily more power, but like slightly closer terms of power than in other situations. And I think that has been the case in a few situations that we may have discussed, but certainly not with the Salah situation right now. And look, I don't think Liverpool would particularly mind holding on to Salah for the remainder of his contract and letting him go for free. You know, I don't think that would be an issue for them, but financially, I mean. But in terms of respecting the player and what he's achieved for the club, and also, you know, the fans' view of the player, I think that's a tricky balancing act that Liverpool have to manage. But again, if Salah makes the situation impossible, particularly with public comments, then Liverpool don't really have a choice, right? They have to put the club first and the club's interests first. So I think the next couple of months, or potentially even weeks, with this situation should be very, very interesting to watch indeed. But again, you know, going back to what you guys mentioned with Philipp Lahm at Bayern and, you know, Toni Kroos at Madrid, it's the age-old argument, right? You know, do you perform until your legs can't go anymore and, you know, just literally keep playing and keep trying until you literally can't do it anymore? Or do you go out at the top, you know, when you leave and then fans want you more and, you know, you kind of check out before you start to reach a very significant decline? And I think that's a very difficult decision for players and clubs to make. And aside from that, I think there's also a lot of high-profile players with big egos and potentially a lot of people around them that tell them they are so great and that they're the best player in the world and they don't need this club and, you know, you're better than this. So I think there's a lot of voices around Salah that might be telling him that he's not the problem. And, you know, I'm not saying he is the problem, but he is not necessarily the solution at this point either to Liverpool's situation. So it's so tricky.
Right, and there have been smart players who know when to bow out before things become ugly.
Yeah.
But yeah, the situation with Liverpool and Salah is very tricky at moments. Before we move on, here's a quick review of the biggest sports headlines in China and around the world for the past week. In the FIFA Best Awards, PSG star Ousmane Dembele has been given the man's top prize at the ceremony in Doha, adding to his Ballon d'Or win from September. The 28-year-old edged Kylian Mbappé and Lamine Yamal to cap off a brilliant year, which saw him guide PSG to their first Champions League triumph.
Tout d'abord, je voulais remercier tous mes coéquipiers.
First of all, I want to thank all my teammates. Our work paid off. This has been a fantastic year for me, individually and collectively. I also want to thank my family, who have always been there for me.
The women's top prize goes to Aitana Bonmati, who also adds this to the Ballon d'Or, which she won for the third time in a row earlier this year. Matvei Safonov made 4 straight penalty saves in a shootout to help Paris Saint-Germain beat Flamengo in the International Cup final and win a 6th trophy of 2025. The goalkeeper was thrown in the air by his teammates after his exploits in the shootout that was won 2-1 by PSG after a 1-1 draw after extra time. It was the first global title for PSG. In the NBA, OG Anunoby made 5 3-pointers and scored 28 points, and the New York Knicks rallied in the fourth quarter to beat the San Antonio Spurs 124-113 and win the NBA Cup in Las Vegas. NBA Cup MVP Jalen Brunson recorded 25 points and 8 assists as the Knicks won their 6th straight game. San Antonio's Victor Wembanyama scored 18 points off the bench, while being limited to 25 minutes in his second contest after missing 12 straight games due to a calf injury. China's Shi Yuqi and An Se-yong from South Korea claimed double honors at the BWF Player of the Year Awards in Hangzhou. Shi claimed back-to-back Men's Singles Player of the Year after the world number one clinched his first ever World Championships title in August in Paris.
Last year, I won the Player of the Year as well, but I think this year I did much better. I can give myself 8 or 9 points out of 10 this year.
An was also named Women's Singles Players of the Year for a second straight year. Both players were competing at the BWF World Tour Finals in Hangzhou. The season-ending tournament features the top 8 players in the year's World Tour standings. Aryna Sabalenka has been named the WTA Player of the Year for a second consecutive season. This honor was decided by media outlets, and the Belarusian became just the third player in the past 15 years to win it more than once. Chinese paddler Wang Manyu successfully defended her women's singles title at the WTT finals in Hong Kong. The Chinese star came through a tense back-and-forth final against compatriot Kuai Man. In the men's final, Japan's Tomokazu Harimoto outlasted Sweden's Truls Morigard in a dramatic showdown to claim his first WTT finals title. Welcome back. Now let's switch to Real Madrid. Xabi Alonso had been hailed as the perfect successor of Carlo Ancelotti, but the recent month has seen a concerning dip in form across different competitions. There have been so many losses, unacceptable losses. Tianyu, at a club notoriously known for its impatience, how many losses, how many poor results can a legendary former player like Xabi Alonso realistically survive before his job is genuinely at risk? Would you say Alonso's job is at risk at the moment?
Well, as a Real fan, emotionally, I want to give him more time because, like you said, he's a former Real Madrid legend. And also, it was the first time for him to really coach a giant club like Real Madrid. And back at the times of his stay in Leverkusen, I mean, he did a real job. He did a really fantastic job. But that success didn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of time for him to build his tactics, instill his tactical genius into that team. So I think if you give him patience, maybe he can build something really different here in Real Madrid. But the problem is very simple. Like you said, this is Real Madrid. There's very little room for patience here. Fans, media, and the management, they all expect results immediately. And the problem is very simple. Right now, the biggest problem for him is that we are dropping points against weaker teams. We lost to Celta, drew with Girona when they're struggling in the relegation zone, and also we dropped points against Elche and Rayo Vallecano. These are games Real Madrid were supposed to win. Also, talking about the games themselves, let's be honest, a lot of the wins in this season have come to Kylian Mbappe saving our team. He scored brilliant goals and just somehow lifted the team to victories. And if he was in poor forms, the team was at a loss. I mean, the tactically, it's hard to tell what Alonso's plan is. The midfield often looks unbalanced, and the structure feels messy at times. So it's not just fans who are unhappy. The management is also closely following the results and the games. And we know how the club works. We've seen it with former managers like Lopetegui, with Benitez. I mean, they are managers who don't get much grace when they left. So if Alonso can't start consistently, gain points and beat the teams he was supposed to beat, I mean, I think his job will be under threat right now.
Brandon, should Xabi Alonso be given like a full year, regardless of results?
It's difficult. I think for Real Madrid, they're in a tricky position because I truly believe that the players, the fans, and even the ownership really do want to give Xabi Alonso the chance to make his mark on the club and give him patience. But when, like Tianyu mentioned, if you're dropping points against weaker teams and you're completely, not yet, but potentially pricing yourself out of the La Liga race and dropping out of, Champions League contention before the knockout rounds. I'm not saying all of that's happening, but let's say it does get to that stage. It kind of ties the hands of the ownership in terms of making decisions, because when that is happening, it's unacceptable for a club like Real Madrid to not be challenging for the title or for the Champions League or for all titles for that matter. But I personally believe that everybody involved, I don't think there's anybody at Real Madrid that wants Xabi Alonso out, to be honest. I don't even think the fans want him out at this point, to be honest. So I think it's going to be an interesting time for Real Madrid. I don't think they've been in a position like this for quite some time where they've wanted and needed to show patience. I think there've been times in the past where they've needed to show patience and didn't want to, and they were like, we don't need this manager, we don't like this guy, we can bring somebody else in experienced immediately and try and get back on track as soon as possible. But at this point in time, like Tian, you mentioned, a Real Madrid legend, a young manager that clearly has a lot of potential. But, Real Madrid is not a club where potential is reached. That's a club where you need to be at your peak, whether you're a manager, a trainer, a kit man, a left back, a striker, you need to be performing at the highest level. So I think it's a unique position for Real Madrid to be in that they haven't been in potentially ever, where they've brought in this young manager that they're so desperate to get the best out of. I think they really do want the best for him, and they do want him to be a long-term option at Real Madrid, not just somebody that stays for 2 or 3 years before they need to bring in somebody else. Look, I think even if Real Madrid don't win a title this season, I personally believe that they should still hang on to Xabi Alonso and give him a full year. But again, if the losses continue and it really, the style of play isn't looking good and there aren't any signs of improvement, then I don't think the club have any choice. But I think at this point in time, give Xabi Alonso a little bit more time. And I think that is possible because the ownership and the fans and the players, and of course Xabi Alonso himself, I think they all want that. But again, let's say in 3 or 4 months' time, there's more shocking losses. There's dropping out of the Champions League. There's not having any hope of a run in the title race. Then it's going to be very difficult for Real Madrid's ownership to hang on to him. But I think at this point in time, I think with the backing of the fans and the ownership, I think Xabi Alonso does have potentially another 6 months to prove himself.
Right. Everyone likes him. Everyone wants him to stay, but he has to go with more losses. That's very Real Madrid. All right. Let's see if Xabi Alonso can turn the table at Real and how the drama between Mo Salah and Liverpool will progress. With that, we end this episode of Sideline Story. Thank you so much for joining us. Subscribe to Sideline Story and leave your comments wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information, you can also check our website at radio.cgtn.com. Until next time, stay on the sidelines with us.